Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for visiting the YouTube channel for bestbiblecommentaries.com. In this video, I'm going to talk about Peter O'Brien. Peter O'Brien is one of the most praised commentary writers of the last 20 or 30 years. He wrote well-reviewed commentaries on Colossians and Philemon in the Word Biblical Commentary series, on Philippians in the NIGTC series, which is this volume here, and also Hebrews and Ephesians in the Pillar New Testament Commentary series. However, around 2016, all his publishers, including Erdmans, IVP, and Zondervan, pulled all his commentaries from the marketplace and destroyed them. Why? And how should we think about this? That's the subject of today's video. Before I go any further, I invite you to subscribe to my channel if you're interested in videos on biblical studies resources. Clicking the like button on my videos is really helpful to me on YouTube. I appreciate you doing that. And feel free to leave a comment down below. One of the ways that people realize there's something going on with Peter O'Brien commentaries is because of how much they are. First, you can't buy them new unless you're buying them on the secondary market, and that has driven up the prices on certain websites. On eBay, for example, his Hebrews volume in the Pillar series, the last 3 volumes to sell in that series, the last three times that particular volume has sold on eBay. One went for $165, another one went for $239, and another one went for $198. This particular Philippians volume, the last few times it sold for $150, and another one sold for $115. And these aren't always new. These are often used copies. The Colossians and Philemon volume in the WBC series go for a little bit less, but used copies will sell for $60, $70, $40, and then another one sold for $105. The Ephesians volume in the Pillar series, the last few times it sold, is $145, $115, and $199. So that usually is an indication that a book is out of print or it's no longer available, but people still want it. And because his volumes are so well reviewed, the demand is high and the supply is low, and that's what drives up the price. So let's talk about the backstory of why these volumes are selling for so much in the marketplace. What is the reason? In 2016, Peter O'Brien was accused of plagiarism. The volume in question was the Hebrews volume in the Pillar New Testament Commentary series. As the story goes, a South Korean scholar was accused of plagiarism when he published 22 volumes, 22 commentaries in 7 years. Now, who he is and what the nature of his commentaries is not important to this story. But in defending his work, defending himself against accusations of plagiarism, he argued that I basically did what Peter O'Brien did in his Hebrews volume, and how he cited or didn't cite this William Lane commentary in the Word Biblical Commentary series. So this South Korean scholar gets accused of wrongdoing, and he says, well, I'm just doing what Peter O'Brien did and how he used William Lane's commentary in the WBC series. So Erdmans found out about this kind of almost like a secondary accusation, I'm not even sure what you would call it, and launched an investigation. Now, me personally, I've never done a comparison on O'Brien's Hebrews volume and the Lane commentary in the Word Biblical Commentary series, so I can't speak to that firsthand. But Gerald Bray, who is a British scholar, some of you who read theology resources might recognize the name, he said in his statement, I'll say more about this in just a moment, but in his statement, he said in part that the nature of the plagiarism was either statements of fact or Bible quotations. That's his understanding of the nature of the plagiarism in that Hebrews volume. So I'll get back to that story in just a minute. Regarding plagiarism, I have served on plagiarism review panels, and in my opinion, all plagiarism is wrong, but not all plagiarism is equally egregious. Now, some might disagree with me about that, and that's okay. I'm willing to accept that. But for example, and I deal with it in an academic setting. So I make a distinction between a freshman who is learning how to write research papers and doesn't cite a source properly or thoroughly versus a senior who has copied and pasted 4 paragraphs from someone else's work for their senior thesis paper. I make a distinction between those two. Both acts of plagiarism are wrong, but they're not equally egregious in my opinion. This analogy might be overused, but I'll say it anyway. It's like a violent crime is against the law, and getting a parking ticket is the result of doing something that's against the law. So both of those acts are against the law, but they're not equally egregious. A violent crime and getting a parking ticket are not equally egregious. So there are examples of commentaries that have been accused of plagiarism in the past, and this one here, I got an example here from the scholar is George Bush. I'm actually not real familiar with him, but he has written a 2-volume Genesis commentary. This is just a reprinted version of it here. I think you can find this for free online because it was published in the middle 19th century. George Bush was a professor at Princeton at the time. He wrote some different commentaries. And what's interesting about those commentaries, so I'm not real familiar with those commentaries, but I'm just using them as an example. Charles Spurgeon, some of you would be familiar with Charles Spurgeon, the 19th century preacher, British preacher. He said about these 2 George W. Bush volumes, he says in his review of them, he says, Bush has in the most barefaced manner taken copious verbatim extracts from Andrew Fuller without acknowledgement, and he has also plagiarized Lawson on Joseph by wholesale, without even mentioning his name. Now, the highlighted part. For such a scholar to be guilty of wholesale plunder is inexcusable. It is one of the worst cases of robbery we have ever met with, and deserves a far stronger denunciation than our gentle pen and slender space will permit. So that was Spurgeon's assessment of Bush's 2-volume commentary. And so when it comes to plagiarism, in my opinion, intention matters. That doesn't mean that a student, for example, shouldn't be disciplined or an author's book shouldn't be pulled from the shelf and destroyed. But I think it's important to note that Zondervan specifically stated that Peter O'Brien, that they had no indication whatsoever in their thorough investigation that Peter O'Brien intentionally misused secondary sources. I have written an article on this issue on my website, and one of the things that I say in that article is that sloppy doesn't necessarily mean deceitful. So sloppy note-taking or sloppy citation doesn't necessarily mean deceitful. Now, in the case of the students that I have dealt with before, I make this distinction not in determining whether plagiarism is right or wrong, but in determining the consequence for the plagiarism. So if a freshman who has good intent but is just learning how to write research papers, that person's discipline will be different. So for example, I might have them rewrite the paper using correct citation and give them perhaps a warning with regard to plagiarism. A senior who copies and pastes 4 paragraphs from someone else's work and tries to pass it off on their own, that's much more egregious. And their intent is different. And so my discipline would be not only failure of the paper, but failure of the class and delay of graduation. So why is that the case? Why are publishers, why is the academic world so strict regarding plagiarism? Well, it's essentially theft. It's stealing someone else's work. That's why even if a person doesn't have ill intent, they didn't mean to do anything wrong, plagiarism is still wrong and needs to be disciplined. So I think it's important to note that no one ever accused Peter O'Brien of having ill intent. However, the discipline or the corrective action still needs to be taken. And so that's why all copies were destroyed. So the rest of the story goes, so Erdman's pulled, this is an Erdman's volume here, the two pillar copies, Ephesians and Hebrews, are both Erdman's publications, and all of the copies were pulled and destroyed. So they no longer sell these volumes. You can only find them on the secondary market. Soon after that, IVP did their own investigation. That was a theology book. I can't remember. I don't think it was a commentary. He wrote a theology book in the new. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's the one that Carson edits. And that was pulled and destroyed. And then Zondervan, which publishes the Word Biblical Commentary series, so that would be the Colossians and Philemon volume that Peter O'Brien wrote. They did their own investigation and they pulled copies and destroyed them. So I'm going to put a link to the article I wrote on this issue down in the description box below. And in that article, I have quoted all of the publisher statements on this issue. So if you want to see what Erdman's, IVP, and Zondervan said about this issue, their exact words, you can look at that article. Also, Gerald Bray, who I referred to before, the British scholar who was talking about the nature of the plagiarism, I also quote that article I quote him in my article. And so just follow that link if you want more information on those exact statements. Peter O'Brien did respond after Erdman's did their investigation. This is what he said, quote, "In the New Testament commentaries that I have written, although I never deliberately misused the work of others, nevertheless I now see that my work processes at times have been faulty and have generated clear-cut but unintentional plagiarism. For this I apologize without reservation." Now, a couple of questions here. Would Peter O'Brien ever publish again? My thought is probably not. As of the making of this video, he's 85 years old, and the publishers had the rights to his commentary and his scholarship. So if they want to pull them and destroy them and not sell them anymore, that's up to them. Peter O'Brien, to my understanding, doesn't have any rights over the material, so he can't just publish them on his own. And it probably would not be wise for him to do that, but that's just one of the questions that I've considered before. Now, have other biblical scholars rebounded from situations like this? Yes, absolutely. I can tell you the name of another commentator in another popular series that's very well reviewed, and that particular volume was found, the citation in it was found to be off, I'll just say, and that commentary was pulled. But since then, that commentator has continued to publish. So that commentator made apology to the person that he didn't correctly cite. He made restitution to the publisher and the original author, and he continues to produce scholarship, and it's very well reviewed, and he's moving forward, I guess you would say. So that's possible, but perhaps that's not going to be the situation for Peter O'Brien. So one of the issues that this involves is note-taking, how scholars take notes. So if I'm doing a paper and using a book to take notes and do my research, and sometimes I might be writing in my notes something that I'm taking word for word from my resource, and then that word for word description makes it into my paper and I don't cite that, that's a problem, and that seems to be the case here. And so the nature of note-taking, as strange as that might sound, the nature of note-taking is actually one of the issues here. And so if you're a student, if you're a writer, even if you're a pastor, that's something to take into consideration of giving credit to whom it is due. And so even though Peter O'Brien didn't have ill intent, which is my belief, it's important that William Lane, in this particular example, get credit for the scholarship that he did. So it's really important. Those citation practices are very important in ministry and in Christian academics. So now here's the question. Here's the question that I'm going to pose to you that I have wrestled with for a few years now, is should Peter O'Brien commentaries be used in any way? And I'm going to be honest, I have wrestled with that, and I invite your comments below. So here's how I've thought about it. I've kind of thought about it in three categories. One is just personal reading. The other is, should they be used for the purposes of ministry, preaching and teaching? And third, should they be used in the environment of academics? So one of those three I'm absolutely sure on. They should not be used in academics. It's my opinion that all Christian college libraries and seminaries should pull his volumes, because when they're being used for research, you cannot give credit to someone else who just hasn't properly cited someone else's research. That's not doing justice to the research of William Lane. So academics is the one that's most clear cut to me. Personal reading, I lean toward yes, although I haven't done much of it. So I obviously haven't destroyed my copy of this volume. Actually, but side note, I found this commentary for $4 at a thrift store, so I did not pay $150 for this commentary. Now, if I'm just interested in learning something about Ephesians just for me, would I use this volume? I think so. I lean toward yes for that one. So I don't know. Some might disagree with me on that. I haven't done it. Maybe a little bit. I can't remember now. Not extensively anyway. But I can tell you that people are doing it. His commentaries are still selling on the secondary market, even though the price is really high. So the third category is in ministry. I don't know. I'd be interested in your comments on that. For a Sunday school class or a sermon, should a pastor consult one of his commentaries? I don't know. So those are the three ways that I've thought about it. Feel free, if you have a different category, go ahead and share it down below. But I kind of thought about it in personal reading. I lean toward yes. Academics, I say absolutely not. Ministry, I just don't know. And that would not only go for Peter O'Brien, but some of the others, George Bush, one of the other modern commentators. Maybe I'll do a video on that later at a different time. But anyway, so let me know what you think. If there's disagreement, just keep it cordial. And I'm fine with you disagreeing with me on something that I've shared in this video. Just keep it cordial. That's all I ask. So I hope it's given you a little bit more information on the kind of the sad situation with Peter O'Brien commentaries, but I hope it provides some explanation of why they're no longer available and why they're so expensive on the secondary market. So thank you for watching this video. Feel free to check out that article I put in the link in the description box.